Hello, this is Dan Jolin, and I love everything to do with tabletop gaming. So here I am on Board Shitless.
Hey there, Chitheads, and welcome back to another episode of Board Shitless. I'm Leki, and this week I'm joined by
Sam
and Tristan.
And this week we've been playing Great Western Trail. So we might as well, we've got nothing else to talk about, so we might as well just talk about the game. So
should we do it in the right order this week and give an overarching idea before we get into the actual details, or just
Nope. Let's discuss strategy and then talk about what game it is.
Do it backwards. So tell everyone who won, and then don't tell them why, and then talk about what happened halfway through the game before we say anything about any sort of general mechanics or anything like that.
I won. I'm not saying why.
Yeah.
And also something happened halfway through where we realised that I shouldn't have won.
You really shouldn't have, to be honest.
It's still a valid victory. Remember, the rule is if we cock something up, then carry on playing and fix it next time.
Definitely.
Winning.
Wow. You sound a little bit louder.
Don't tempt me.
So, so Great Western Trail, it's basically, it can't get any more Euro-y in its sort of mechanisms, can it really? So the theme behind the game is that every player plays a rancher. You're in the 19th century America, and you're very slowly getting a big herd of cattle from Texas to Kansas, sending them off on the train to market, coming all the way back to Texas, and rinsing and repeating for about 7 or 8 rounds until your cowboy character then, I imagine, dies of old age or retires.
It's a bleak ending now.
Mine retired because he made about $150 went off into the sunset. Each player's, so there's a board in the middle, and then each player's got a player board, which you've got various markers covering loads of abilities. Over the course of the game, you start to send those out onto the board, claiming various train stations, various locations, geographical locations across America, and then you're trying to build buildings within the map itself for more victory points. You're trying to increase your herd of cattle for victory points. You're then trying to add extra bits and pieces to the game for victory points. Everything you do is just chasing victory points, really, isn't it?
Point salad.
Yeah. Hugely so. And the game probably breaks down into a couple of different stages, really. You've got this race across the board where you're trying to negotiate your cattle along, you're trying to sell some off, replace them, buy some more at market on the way. Then you actually get to the train station at Kansas City, and then you're loading them up, you're sending them off. Something really bizarre happens with trains that I couldn't get my head around at all until the last round. So we'll let Tristan describe that a little bit later. And then, and you just keep tying up victory points until someone wins. Pretty much game in a nutshell. So what did everyone think of it? Did we have fun this evening?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Pretty conclusive.
Join us next time on Board Shitless. What did you think, Leki?
I really enjoyed it. Even though I didn't really get the game until about halfway through. I think you're
using that as a crutch. I think you got the game
and just played it very badly.
You didn't cheat well enough was the problem.
No, well, I didn't treat as well as you, who was just blatantly cheating and then telling us you were cheating.
Sam just had very fast trains, that's all.
I was very open about it.
Sam was the retcon king for this game, but it's the first game that we played of this particular game. It's not the first game we played ever. It'll be a terrible podcast if at episode 70 we tried a game and it was all right.
There's quite a lot of moving parts to this. I think that's what's different from, for example, the Euro-y type games that we've been playing recently, like Viticulture and Euphoria and stuff, which are kind of worker placements. So you place a worker and you do the thing. And in this, you've got your cowboy traveling through the land, going to locations and doing an action and doing a bunch of different actions. There's quite a lot to process. You've got your train chugging along to different stations, which you're pushing up a longer train track throughout the game, repairing stations as you go and collecting victory points. You're also doing a little bit of deck building in that your herd of cattle, you're trying to build a deck of decent cards. And I have to say, I do enjoy this game, but it's probably the least interesting deck building ever. You've got green cows, blue cows, yellow cows, red cows, purple cows.
Would you like any more cows?
And
black cows.
Leki, what was that point you made about there should be flavour text on the cow cards?
Literally.
You're laughing as though it's being glib.
Moo, it says.
You laugh as though it was being glib, but I genuinely thought, because all the cows, like, yeah, it was like, this is a purple card with 4 victory points on it and a cost.
Justify those victory points.
But no, but it was like, hey,
this cow comes from Wagyu.
It's like
Wagyu massage.
making these up now, but it's like a Jersey Wrangler or a Aberdeenshire belt edge.
Handbagging waiting.
Yeah, but like they've obviously like put like the designer had obviously put some thought into what breeds were available at the time and what ranchers were doing. And I thought it would be really nice. I mean, it's probably €2 too geeky, but like just put a line on there saying like these cows were great for hide, or like
they're very pretty pictures of cows.
Well known for their
like
horns.
cows.
Yeah, totally.
There could have been something more interesting there, couldn't there? It could have been like travellers or the stuff that you picked up along the way, tobacco, whiskey, also some cows.
Alexander Pfister, the designer of the game, he's gone in hard on the rancher theme, and he's not moving for anything.
No.
So,
and there's not even a pistol inside. There's cowboys.
No, well, it's not about that, is it? It's about
there's no Stetsons.
It's about driving cattle through fords and across valleys until you hit Kansas. So
there's no gunfights.
Yeah,
the Indians, as they're called in this game, the Native Americans are called Indians in this game, but they're peaceful. You trade with them. Sometimes they take money, sometimes they give money.
And steal their teepees.
Well, you collect them. It says negotiate. You negotiate with them. So
yeah.
Totally. Well, okay, fair enough. So the theming from the deck is very bland. The deck building, yes, it could be more interesting in terms of like abilities and stuff, but it does what it does very well. Like at the end of the day,
there's probably no other game that builds cow decks better than Great Western Trail.
So, well, someone's going to end up on Facebook and be like, well, you've never played Farmers of the Fjords.
Top trumps cows.
Yeah, oh my goodness. That'll probably exist. If it doesn't exist, I'm making that game.
Cow trumps.
So anyway, we digress. So the deck, I suppose, is just a mechanism for maths.
It's
really?
yet another, isn't it? Another thing that you're sort of tracking. So you've got your moving your cowboy, building your deck, pushing your train along, selling the cattle, building your buildings as well, collecting workers. But workers in this game, you don't place the workers as like actions. They just help you do more stuff. Like the more engineers you have, the faster your trains can go.
Yeah. So
unless you Sam,
as you can tell from the discussion,
in which case they just go really fast anyway.
As you can tell from the discussion when we were like playing the game and talking about the game, we were very much zeroed in on the rancher ability. So like the cowboys would be moving cows along, but then you'd also be placing them into like your worker track. And then when you get to these like local markets, I suppose, meet other people on the road and say, that's a lovely cow, may I buy it? The more cowboys you've got, the better skills you are at identifying them and getting a good price. So they'll bring them down, or they'll make more high value cards available. There was also an engineer and a craftsman. So the craftsman would build buildings, and then the engineer would help you move your train along. Or do something with these stations. Now, we've just kind of ignored them as like flavour, and was just like, yep, it's cowboys moving cows all the time, and these things are just incidental to like selling the cows or whatever. When in actual fact, I think it's probably a 3-point theme, isn't it? Where you've got like the ranchers moving cattle and herding them, then you've got the crafters actually building settlements and stuff and populating America, and then you've got the engineers building like these fancy coast to coast railway lines and prospecting across. I don't think that theme's missed in the game. I think we just missed it. It seems that like your game boards controlling multiple elements of like American culture in the 19th century, but we're just like, cows are pretty and we're moving them. I don't think it's making much sense.
Well, I think it's because you've got the art is on the cards, so like, that's where your eyes drawn, and also to the board. The board is really pretty. In fact, I bought a game 100% based on seeing somebody post a picture of the board on Facebook, and I went, "Want?" and I think the theme is there as much as it is in any Euro, but because the way that you build your deck, you're looking at your hand of cards every turn. The overriding thing that's jumping out of you isn't cowboys, engineers, trains, and stuff. It's cows, but maybe that's because I'm naturally more inclined towards cards than the rest of the stuff. The theme
it's
is
definitely
implemented
there,
very well, and because all those different elements hinge together, it'd be a pain in the bum to try and retheme it as something else, because it relies on developing the train track, herding your cattle and all that kind of stuff. And if you said, oh, you could just reskin it as Star Wars, you'd be really hard pressed to then sort of come up with ways. So I think it's one of those where the theme and the mechanics dovetail really well, and I think in that respect it's sewn together quite elegantly.
I mean, the only thing that I can say in rebuttal would be that the railway track would definitely be the trench run. If you were to,
okay, here we go.
If Alexander,
the cows would be X-wings.
Alexander, if you're listening and you want to do reskin it, then this is how you do it. Grab your notepad. But what I found was with the game that sort of it confused me. It's the layers of complexity of the game, and me being very literal. So what I struggled with was the railway track. So the basic mechanic is that your cows all have a certain value. If you get more than one certain type of cow in your hand, so you've got 2 jerseys in your hand, then you can only score one of those. They don't multiply. So your hand's sort of overinflated and you need to try and get rid of one and swap it with a
unique range of different
Exactly.
types.
Yeah. So by the time you get to Kansas, you tot up all those unique cards, and then they tell you, their overall total will tell you how far you can actually send the cows away. So if you've got a total of 12, you can go to like Puerto Rico. If you've got 18, you can get to San Francisco. But what I sort of got confused with was if I send the train track also acts as like a little racing game. So you've got stations at intervals, and you can sort of run ahead and try and claim stations and get victory points that way. But I was getting confused, so I was sending my train down to like San Francisco, thinking, "Oh my god, this is going to get really expensive. We're going to need 18 coins to pay for it, so I can send my cows to San Francisco." And then I'd show my deck when I got to Kansas, and I'd have like $4 worth of cows. And Tristan's like, well, maybe you can get to the corner shop. It's like, no, but I've got all this money. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't work like that.
I blame whoever taught you the game.
No, I don't think it was. I don't think it was that. I think it's because each element of the game does about 3 different things, unless it's a tracker. So I just got sort of looked at each of the elements as they did one thing, and then sort of like slowly came to realize that they didn't. But it's still fun.
There's a lot to juggle.
It's quite a complicated game, isn't it, in terms of waiting and what's going on.
In terms of what you do in a turn, it's fairly simple. You move your cowboy, you do your actions, and then you draw back up to your hand size. So, but it's all the complexity that comes with that once you drill down to like the local actions on each building, the fact that you can pass and do your own set of actions, and you also have your player board, which you're leveling up as you go.
Yeah.
So each time you sort of put a disc down on a train station, you can then unlock a new ability for your little your ranches, I guess.
It did feel like quite a steep learning curve though, so we were all quite slow initially, and about a third of the way through we just suddenly clicked, and the turns went from taking about 10 minutes each to just a minute in some cases. Like we were just whizzing through them.
Yeah,
because you recognise all the symbols. You'd been round once or twice. You started recognising everything. You knew what you wanted to do. You knew what you needed. Then towards the end of the game, it started to slow down a bit more when you were trying to get the most points out of your turn.
Yeah, like the
so
AP.
A bit more AP then. But you
that's
really
kind of how Euros go, isn't it? When you're doing those point ones and you're trying to maximise your turns. First of all, you're trying to figure out what's going on.
Completely. It always works out that way towards the end. But early on, it was that sort of light bulb moment of actually, it's everything gelled quite well together. It was just understanding how those pieces worked individually, and then the flow really picked up and the speed really picked up. It became more entertaining, I think, then, because it was just a bit more of a laugh, going around.
There was like the third turn retconning, wasn't there? Like the entire third turn just seemed to be like one massive retcon, where we'd all agree that we didn't really do what we wanted to, and we'll just turn a blind eye for change the sort of board state around a little bit. What I liked as well about it was everything's done with iconography, isn't it? They've taken a very much like a Stone Meyer game sort of approach to how the game's laid out. So there's a lot of buildings that look quite complicated because you'll go in it and then it'll just be like pictures and arrows and little circles and stuff. But once you've worked out what 2 or 3 of those things do, you can sort of work out the other ones quite easily. And I think we only have to consult the rule book like once or twice for stations, which themselves are quite unique in terms of like how the icons work in the rest of the game. So the game's quite easy to pick up from that point of view. And quite
the
nice
design
to see.
of those icons was quite clear as well. Like when we first started, the draw a card and discard a card in one icon actually is quite simple and quite clean.
Yeah.
So when you're seeing it, you instinctively know. And when you see the same icons used for other actions, it's like, oh, I know what I'm doing. Just a green arrow and a red arrow. It's like very simple.
Communication through design, wasn't it? Really.
Yeah.
And they weren't too big as well. It's like, because sometimes you see things like that on cards, and the icons themselves are quite big
or too small.
Yeah, and they seemed like a good size. They weren't intruding on the artwork. They weren't like hogging the tile. And the tiles didn't seem to be any bigger than they needed to, and neither did the meeples.
Just a little bit of art on it. And
yeah, it's just really well considered.
Yeah, quite well designed.
Yeah. And the artwork itself is like ubiquitous to Euros, isn't it? It's like looking at a copy of like Agricola or Viticulture, lovely, cute little like mountains and stuff. It looks like a big wide area, but at the same time, it's got like its nice little details. That was nice.
Lots of wooden bits.
Loads of wooden bits. Which, it feels like you get your money's worth when there's loads and loads of little bits and pieces like that. It was nice to have a Euro that sort of like the mechanism behind like the drive of the game was card-based, rather than just having like, here's 20 meeples and try and get them out on the board and then do a sort of worker placement area control thing. So it just felt a bit different from that point of view.
Yeah, the actions were quite interesting, weren't they? There was like move your train backwards to destroy a card from the game kind of thing. And some of them, if you unlock those actions, because you only start off with a couple of basic actions like gain a gold or draw and discard a card kind of thing. But then depending on which areas of your board you choose to unlock, you may or may not get to certain abilities, and some of them are slightly more interesting than others. You could push your train further along the tracks by paying money, or pare your deck down kind of thing, which you did quite heavily, Leki. You were your deck by the end of it was a lot tighter because you'd got rid of all the crappy cards out of it and focused on like the bigger victory point cards, whereas I think me and Sam spent less time doing that. Yeah. Although it's something I always want to do in deck building games, is get rid of the chaff sort of thing. But the game also gives you building tiles that you can go to and actions where you can actually use the chaff card. So even in the last turn of the game, if you draw a cow that's worth one of the Jersey cows, there's still about 3 or 4 different locations on the board where that's useful. Yeah. And you can go and trade them away for coins or certificates and things like that.
Yeah, that's right. When you're working through that sort of race across America to get the cattle to Kansas, and at the first few rounds, it feels very much like you're trying to actually find cattle and build it up. But then sort of like midway through towards the end of the game, it's all about hand manipulation. So me and Tristan were spending most of our actions, instead of using the actual icons that were on the buildings, we were sort of like, you can elect to use one of your sort of auxiliary actions from your player board. So we were doing that to like discard a card and bring a new card in, or move your train back 1 and burn a card. Sam, I think, was just using it to buy more and more victory points hungrily. And you actually won by quite a margin in the end.
Yeah, it was because I spent a lot of my early game buying up expensive cows. And then all of the objective cards coming out were, if you've got lots of a mixture of cows, then you win it. And it turned out I had like the perfect number of cows at the end. It was perfect storm, quite weirdly. And that I didn't even cheat at that bit, to be fair. But yeah, going back to your earlier point about like the rubbish, the starting cards, the cheap cost, because it's not just the buildings themselves, but some of the locations have abilities underneath the building. So you put a tile on top, but then you can use these 1-cost cards to gain certificates, which is improvements to your cows basically, and gain gold for it, as well as the action on the cards. So it's a way of, as you're moving across, you traveling from Texas to Kansas, you start off and you draw your hand back up after discarding it all down the first time. You end up with 4 cards to start with if you level up to 6 cards, and then you try to get those best cards in your hand by the time you get back to the end. So you go into these places and you're using the abilities to discard the rubbish cards to draw extras or get rid of those duplicates. So it almost feels like you're not wasting turns. And even when you get those cards in your hand, which you think are rubbish, there's opportunities to switch them out or discard them all the way through. Discarding your duplicates down, discarding the cheap cost cards. Just if the location doesn't help, just drawing a card and discarding one. You've always got ways to manipulate what you've got in your hand in it. So it never feels like you're stuck. Yeah. Unless you play like me and you discard all the good stuff down and then realise you've got 1 space left and you just draw up a load of duplicates again.
You made a good point there, sort of like, like the game must have been absolutely play tested to death, because there wasn't any buildings really that were out that we thought that's actually quite rubbish. Like, it was all very contextual. If you needed more money, you went to the money spots. If you needed to sort your hand out and get rid of cows, you went to those spots. And it all felt very tight, even at the end of the game.
It all felt useful, right?
Very much useful, yeah. Rather than sometimes certain areas can feel quite flabby, or like, you know, after the first sort of rounds, then locations become useless in some Euro-style games. Whereas here, everything just felt very, very considered.
They did feel less useful towards the end. So because you have your own set of buildings, we all had the same buildings, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And you, realistically, with a couple of exceptions, have to build them in a certain order. You get a choice of 3 at the first level, then there's 1 at the second level.
Yeah.
And that's about as far as we got. So you all end up building the same buildings, but like the one where you gain gold for the 2 gold for every building you've got in the forest.
The economy one, wasn't it?
Very early on at the game, that was really useful for getting the gold, but by the end of the game, we were just skipping past those locations because it was no longer really that beneficial.
Yeah,
but you have to just end up paying each other.
But by that point, we'd already got our like massive Uber herd sorted, where we're getting like 20 around.
Yeah, you ended up with about 80 gold, didn't you?
yeah, isn't that
101 actually? But you know, like early on, those were useful, so you get to build them early on. Then later on, it's not as, and it's quite good that again back to the playtest, and it's like clearly that's what you need early game. Then later, when the other stuff starts coming out, it's not as useful anymore, but you can just skip past it because you've got extra movements and things. And the way the movement works is you can move up to 3 locations. So you can actually just skip past those. You move up to the next location. It's not just a place, is it?
No, so that's something else you can level up as well, isn't it? You can level up your movement to make that even more effective, up to 4 or 5.
Which means that you can be skipping back to Kansas more frequently, faster and faster, skipping past all these buildings. But
that's an interesting dynamic as well, where the faster you move, the quicker you get to Kansas, and the quicker you get those scoring rounds in.
Yeah.
But also, there's a temptation to sort of kind of use every space along the way to maximize your hand by the time you get to Kansas. And there's this weird sense of like, oh, somebody's, maybe Leki's finished the board more quickly and it looks like he's going to lap me now. And then you're sort of trying to work out, but is that a good thing? Has he then missed all these extra spots that I'm scooping up along the way? And there's an interesting sense of timing about you always feel like you're on the back foot, and either you should be moving faster or slower and using all the buildings or not using all the buildings.
Yeah.
And
the game, if you sort of decide that you're going to like not sort of rush to get to Kansas and then concentrate more on passing your hand or on trying to build up more money so you can buy more workers towards like when you get to the end of the map, because there's certain like predefined locations already out there. There's a real danger that you can miss out on one of these Kansas trips, and if you sort of fall behind for whatever reason, so like you can't claim as many cities, or you can't just literally get there quick enough. I think I finished about 20 victory points behind you, Tristan, and then you again were about 15 behind Sam. And all of a sudden, these gaps can open up. And throughout the entire game, you always feel this like sort of like panic state of game state confusion, don't you? Where it's like, am I winning? Am I losing?
Yeah,
like,
there's
what's
no
going on?
victory point tracker, is there? It's spread across, I think, 11 different elements. Like we said before, you get points for cows, points for train stations, points for this, that, and the other, buildings and everything. But what that left me with at the end of it was that we all had similar sort of amounts of workers, buildings. We were all at a similar spot on the train tracks, and we were all sort of competing for all the different elements, except obviously Sam, you'd improved your deck and had like all the high cost cows and stuff, whereas Leki had achieved more of the train station master objectives and things like that. So there was like some flexibility, but it feels like if we played it again, we'd all be able to pursue new different strategies. So none of us filled a track of workers, which would give you a load of extra bonus victory points. None of us got the train to the very end of the track, which would get you loads of extra stations. None of us built buildings that required loads of workers. We all just had a few of each of these bits. So it'd be interesting to play it again now and know that there's like a ton of different options to pursue. Like I might go, okay, I'm just going to get my train. I'm going to get engineers in. So my trains are going to be super fast. I'm going to build the engineers to the end of I'm going to employ 6 of these dudes. So I get my extra victory points from having loads of the engineers. I unlock the individual engineer bonuses as I go. My trains are just whizzing around all over the place, going from station to station. And then Sam could be like, right, I'm going to go for builders, and I'm going to build tons and tons of buildings. And Leki might go, well, I'm just going to go really fast. I'm going to whiz around the board and just keep going to Kansas and dropping the herd up. So there's definitely like a lot of interesting and different strategies to pursue. And I think tonight just sort of had a taste of each of them.
Oh, definitely. And you get the FOMO. Like if you see somebody like pushing
you've got
the train,
cowboys. Leki's got cowboys. I need cowboys now.
They've got like 7 stations and I've got 2. I need to concentrate on stations, and all of a sudden, like all those cows that you've built up just sort of like get forgotten about, and then you've got this claggy hand of rubbish when you do get to Kansas.
I definitely had that when I think you two had a bunch of cowboys, and you when you were going to market, you had all these different options. And I was like, whenever I went to market, I just had to get the crappy 3-legged cow or whatever was just left remaining
for all of your gold.
Yeah. So then I was like, right, okay, I'm going to save up and make sure I get an extra cowboy, and I did. Yeah. And then immediately employed him as a station master. Like I didn't get the benefit, and I got back to the start, and I was like, oh yeah, I should have hung on to it.
It's funny you mentioned that, because there was a round when I deliberately stopped at all the market action stops just to buy like 7 cows, because you and Sam had bought all the cows out of the market the round before. I was like, well, I can't let that happen again. Buy cows. And then I've got all like, it was ridiculous. At one point I had a hand and it had 2 5-value cows in it. I was like, one of them's useless. How do I get rid of it? I can't burn it. What do I do?
Yeah, well, that's another interesting thing, because you buy those cows and the worth points in your deck at the end of the game. But functionally, if you buy duplicates of the same, 5 cost, same colour cow, if you draw them in the same turn, you're going to burn one. You got to get rid of it somehow, and it's like, I'm wasting this.
Oh, totally. There's a certain amount of satisfaction to be gleaned from starting a round with like a rubbish hand, spending 20 minutes meticulously paring it down and getting rid of cows and putting new cows in, and then getting to Kansas and going, gin. I've got 6 different cows here and they're all unique. You try and find a blemish on them. And it's just super satisfying. It doesn't win you the game, really. It probably uses up a lot more
Feels like a minor
resources.
win, though, during that round, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a moral victory.
That was like one of my tactics. I saw the cows and figured they'd be quite important. So that's why I started buying them early, as many as possible.
You just thought they were pretty.
Yeah.
Very beautiful. But as soon as I got a good hand, then I started rushing for Kansas. So I'd be stalling to go to all these places to get my deck right. And then as soon as I was like, okay, I've got enough to get to that location, which is where my train is, let's just rush to the end now. Let's just start leapfrogging places, because I can get there, get those, cash those points in, start again, get some better cows.
Yeah.
Because when you cash the cows in at the end, you get a load of money for it as well. So you can start the next round.
Yeah, that was...
And a better foot.
Flush.
Yeah.
And then you can have you'll have moved your train up a little bit, and you'll have unlocked the next bit, but then you start to get more cows. So it was like, all right, I can unlock the next bit. I can get to the higher scoring points. So it was just building up, rush to the end, and then start again. And it's quite...
Well, that was my penultimate round. I had 2 value cows of the same variety. Boo. And so I did like a cheeky little swap a card out, discard a card and draw a card. And I got a unique cow. And I was like, yes, this is the best decision I've ever made. And
my entire life has been leading up to this moment.
And I can score some points from my last turn. So it, like, even though I came last, it still felt like I was doing everything that I possibly could in order to achieve it. And it just involved just enough gambling. So it was out of my hands, but within my sort of grasp as well. The whole game felt just super nice and fun to play.
I did it the opposite way when I had duplicates of cows and thought, right, I'll trade them both in for 4 gold and draw 2 new ones. And I draw 2 that I'd already had one of in my hand, so I ended up with triple cows. I was like, this is worth nothing in the last.
Yeah. There's one thing that I'd like to mention is the geographical element of moving your herd through all the different buildings and stuff on the trail. It's not linear. So you've got about 4 or 5 different pathways that open up and close down. There's danger like avalanches and deep fords and stuff that you have to get across, which other players can bring out when they get to Kansas. You can spend money to actually claim them. Again, they're worth victory points. And they might close off a trail, they might open up a trail, so then you can avoid paying a toll to one of your fellow players, or you can try and force everyone down towards one of your inns or something to make more money. And that's quite nice as well. It just feels like another element to the game where you...
And by clearing them, you get victory points as well. So
you do, yeah.
You're encouraged to clear them, not only to open up the paths, but also because they give you points and go towards the objectives.
But it also means that some of the paths stay suspiciously clear because people actually end up getting greedy for them. So the second they come out, then someone will claim it. And it's like, well, that would normally stop people from going to my like general store. But now the general store's open. Thanks. And everyone's spending money there. It's like, I think it's a really fun game. And the theme sounds so dry when you explain it to somebody. But when you actually get into the actual gameplay, then it all makes perfect sense and it all actually ticks along very nicely.
The mechanics are quite fun.
The mechanics are super fun. And they're all like, some of them are like super old. They've been around as long as like games. And some of them feel super fresh because they've just mixed it up in a way that's just different.
Yeah, and everything, like you said, just reinforcing what you're saying about like everything that comes out feels like it's got a use. You know, those disasters come out and you expect them all to just stack up over the course of the game, but actually no, somebody's motivated to clear them up after themselves and claim them as victory points. But everything serves a purpose, and the iconography is really, it's so elegant and easy to pick up. Like within a couple of turns, I gave... As always, gave you guys almost no rules explanation before we started playing. I was like, you'll pick it up. And you did. You know, you were away in a couple of turns. Yes, it led to a couple of retcons.
Yeah.
But it was one of those where you're like, oh, okay, I get what this icon does. And then there's a couple of questions here and there, but basically you're just like,
we had like player board and icon explanation 101, didn't we? Like we looked at one or two buildings, we looked at the track, and then we're like, okay, let's go for it. And it didn't take long at all. I mean, we messed up a couple of things, but it's this game. You know, it's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's like all of those games, like the Euros, where you've got all of the stuff in front of you, and you're like, oh my God, what does all of this mean?
Yeah. And
then after literally about 2 turns, it's like, oh yeah, it's all coming together. Yeah. And that's what it was like learning it as well. Picking up the rule book, I was like, oh, it looks like a big, dense rule book. You know, it's going to take me ages to process this. But then you're like, oh, you move your guy, you do a thing, and next player, that's and those. You just can't go wrong with that. And there's a little bit of eclipse in there with the player boards, like, and the way you level up by moving the wooden tokens off, which I really enjoyed.
Well, my only criticism, and it's so nitpicky, would be perhaps the train line needs a little bit more explanation somehow, so that people really get that there's a train race for stations, and you're trying to, and those are completely separate to claiming cities and like where you're sending your cameras at the end. I struggled to separate the two. It took me a long time.
Is that a criticism of Tristan's?
No, it's a
description.
I think it is.
Not really, because we all admit we're all relying heavily on the iconography of the game and the actual design of the board layout in order to learn the game as we're going along, and that's perfectly valid because you can do that. It's just that's the one area where it wasn't so simple because the train's doing several different jobs. So
which are all separate from the rest of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
So I see what you mean.
That's it. Like I said, it's super nitpicky. Like we all had fun, even though like we all played it in completely different ways. We all had fun with it. And if we were to play it again, we'd all probably choose different strategies, but just because we'd want to mess around with it and see what happened. Yeah.
Going back to one of the other things you were saying before about the everything seems like it's got value. Even I quite like the way that the movement worked. So you've got a maximum range of movement instead of having a set movement or rolling a dice movement. It's you start off and you can move 3 spaces or 3 buildings. So it's not just spaces, there's no wasted. So you're looking at the next 3 buildings going, right, which of these is going to be useful for me? I might have to pay a bit to go through some of these, but I can choose one of these 3 or one of these 4 when you level up. So you always feel like you can do something. It's not just land on and then make the most out of the situation. So I think it was quite a nice mechanic that as well.
Yeah,
that movement piece.
You could move 1 onto a tile and then ignore the tile and then just do whatever's on your player board that you think is useful to you at the time.
Yeah, loads of options. And it meant you could sort of, as you were getting closer to Kansas City, you'd sort of work out how many spaces you could leapfrog over. So you'd go, this turn I'll just move these 2 and just do a basic action here. So I can move all 4 and get through to the Kansas in one go. So I quite like that. It was a lot more decision based than just luck based or stuff. I think it's quite nice.
Yeah, each go felt useful. You didn't just sort of go, or if you did, you were building up to a bigger turn, but there wasn't any feeling like we're playing Rise of Queensdale at the moment with Francesco, and some of those some turns you're just like, oh, I'm just going to get a gold, and you can do that in Great Western Trail as well. But most of the time you've got a bunch of other options you can do as well. Or you're doing that specifically to tee up another option.
Yeah.
It very rarely feels like, I don't know what to do this turn, so I'll just get a gold or just draw a card. It's always part of a mini strategy or a mini goal that you're working towards as well. You always feel motivated by what's there, and you don't get the dreaded sort of miss a turn vibes.
Oh no, not at all. It'll be really cool to. Is there any expansions available for this game?
I think it only came out last year.
It's a super recent game. It's a sort of weird one because I thought that it had been out for a few years, but I think it was maybe just the buzz of the game leading up to I don't know if it was kickstarted, but leading up to its release and then after its release.
Yeah.
I know loads of people were talking about it. Loads of people still mention it on the podcast when they mention like what sort of games they love playing. And is it this Alexander Pfister that's doing Blackout as well? Blackout Hong Kong?
Right.
But that's another game as well that's like seems to be quite interesting and quite like hotly anticipated. Yeah, quite buzz behind it. And it makes me really excited to try and like check out that game as well now.
Yeah.
Especially in light of playing this.
Oh, definitely.
I think it really benefits as well from all those games that have come before. Like you were talking about Agricola and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I saw some discussion about this on a Facebook group the other day where someone was saying the quantity of games is increasing every year, which of course it is, but the quality isn't. And I was like in two minds about it because I was like, actually, and we've got Dominion sitting on the table here, which we're going to discuss at some point in a future episode. But what it does is these games, the sort of groundbreaking ones that set the rules, then allow a bunch of following games, like you've got Agricola and a worker placement type games, and then you've got games like this, Great Western Trail, and you can immediately jump in and add a theme and level it up a notch and add all these interesting things and skip out all the stuff that didn't work so well in the older games to actually deliver straight away a really high quality game with great components, great art, and good, really solid gameplay straight away. And I think actually the variety of games does mean that people can draw on more different sources of inspiration to develop new interesting themes that you've perhaps not seen before. I would never have thought cattle herding would be something that I go for. Actually,
you thought it was a cowboy game, didn't you?
I just wanted to wear a Stetson while we were playing. But,
explains why you head to toe in denim.
We'll be playing Western Legends next week and rolling dice or whatever. But no, it's just, I think it does give people the opportunity to stand on the shoulders of giants, use other designs and make more interesting and cool
definitely
themes and games out of them.
Yeah, and it's not like this is a case of picking 4 or 5 different mechanics from different games and chucking them all together in a box. Because
these are all carefully thought out and carefully sewn together.
Wouldn't work half as well unless it had been really well designed. If you're going to sort of like show someone what an example of like a really well designed game, both in like games design and graphics design and packaging and just everything really, nothing seems out of place and it all seems very cohesive. And it feels like it's almost like an instant classic, isn't it? It feels like it's the way it always was.
Yeah, the only way, I think, if you had a problem with, if you had like bovine fear, that might be, the only way that you'd come away with a negative experience. But yeah, there's so much to like, and it's
definitely
deep enough that I definitely want to play it again and give it another go and try some different strategies and ting.
It might sound a bit weird, but to me, it didn't feel like a Euro as much. It did feel quite like the theme was quite like heavy in it. I like my heavy theme type games, but I was quite invested in it as a whole. I think it was down to the imagery on the cards and the board.
Did you feel like a proper rancher?
A massive
Jolly
rancher. Maybe not that far, but compared to a lot of Euros, like with like playing Agricola and stuff, and it's just like there's wood on the board, like, and you kind of lose the immersion. Even Carcassonne, which the theme's a bit better, it's not as immersive, but I think this was quite nice for that. So I think I got invested in it a bit more.
Cool.
Just a thing that I thought.
No, it's definitely a game of what you make of it. At the end of the day, the theme is just a mechanism to cover up what is essentially counting. You're just doing some maths all the way around. You're adding stuff up, you're subtracting stuff.
And I counted the best.
And, you're trying to just optimize whatever you've got in your hand at the beginning of the round. It doesn't always feel that way. Like the terrain definitely distracts you from that. Adds a few extra elements into what could be quite a dull experience of draw cards, pass down, move on. They've added enough stuff which within its own right makes the game what it is. It's probably like 5 different games in one, but you can't tell where one of those sorts of games mechanism ends and the new one starts. It all blends and works so well together.
What do you think of the cover?
I think the cover's pretty cool.
They look a bit like Thunderbirds.
A little bit.
It's 3 blokes with hats looking at you.
So yeah, if you want to do a Google image
I'm
search.
not sure it's not the same bloke in slightly different poses and slightly different
to me it looks
ages.
Yeah, to me
Maybe they're all related. But that's the 3 main dudes, isn't it? It's the cowboy, the engineer, and the craftsman on the front cover. I think the front cover could be more evocative. If I had to make a criticism, it would be talking over Leki and not letting him finish a sentence whilst he's trying to say anything.
I'm going to put on
I'm just talking.
I'm going to put on my art student beret and say it represents the 3 faces of man during the 19th century.
Leki, Sam, and Tristan.
The rancher, the engineer, and the craftsman. So you are those 3 job types. Or
where's the farmer?
they've just messed with one 3D model slightly to make the artwork cheaper. Who knows?
It does have a train in the corner.
It has. It's got it's got
TP.
TPs. It's fine. It's great. It looks nice. The art on the board is better.
Yes.
Inside the box is prettier than the outside.
Yeah, but come on, it's a great game and it looks pretty as well. So let's not complain too hard. That's us for another week. Remember to leave us a review on iTunes or on SoundCloud and to give us a nice big rating as well. You can join us on Facebook at the Board Chitless Facebook group, or you can find us on Twitter at board_chitless. And there's probably some other places as well, but I'll try and remember those for next week. So until then, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.